Get on with the show. Time for the chorus. Only this buzz. It's Kubrick's universe. All right. Kubrick's universe.
Open the podcast doors, Hal.
It's Kubrick's Universe, the Stanley Kubrick Podcast.
Hello.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. How's it going with you?
Well, I've gone through all the questions. I've looked up my photos. I've tried to piece this all together.
Oh, don't worry, man.
Oh my God. It's like 15 years of, when did that happen?
Hey, Kubrick fans and worldwide friends. Thanks for tuning into Kubrick's Universe once again. In this episode, we're going to hear from incredible model maker, the very talented and cooler nerd than you will ever be, Mike Scott. Mike is a model maker, science fiction nut, and self-confessed nerd. He was a child during the Apollo space program in the 60s, and at 6 years old, was blown away when he saw 2001: A Space Odyssey in the cinema with his dad. After eventually working out what was real and what was just a movie, he continued his obsession. He started off doing what's called kit bashing, which is basically creating his own unique models from parts of other existing model kits. And then he moved on to detailed model and costume replicas in the 1970s. Whether it was Kiss's Gene Simmons or Darth Vader, Mike won costume contests as a teenager, and then eventually he met and worked with special effects legend Greg Nicotero, who gave him a very special commission to make an exact replica of the Clavius Moon Base spacesuit from 2001: A Space Odyssey. This suit has been displayed in exhibits around the world, including the annual science fiction convention Escape Velocity at the Museum of Science Fiction in 2018 on the 2001 50th anniversary. His replica spacesuit was featured also at the Envisioning 2001 Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey exhibition, which premiered in January 2000 at the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens, New York, to much acclaim. Mike spends an incredible amount of time just researching to make sure his work is as close to, if not better, than the originals. And now you'll hear him talk about how he went about creating one of the most iconic costumes in the history of cinema. Mike also shares with us stories about his appearance on Adam Savage's great show, Mythbusters, as well as working with ILM, Dungeons and Dragons, meeting real-life astronauts, as well as make-believe ones. So kick back, grab a tray of TV dinner-looking space food. Don't burn your fingers. And join us in listening to this great conversation with Mike Scott. But whatever you do, don't leave your space helmet in the pod bay. I mean, if for no other reason, you just can't replace headphones that sound that good. I'm your host and humble narrator, Jason Furlong, welcoming you once again through the prism of the slit scan and into Kubrick's Universe. Mike, let's start at the beginning. When did you first see 2001: A Space Odyssey? I mean, how old were you? And do you remember your specific first impressions?
Yeah, actually. did leave a huge impression on me. I'm a child of the 60s, so in 68 I was like six years old, and my parents were also into kind of science fiction fantasy, so we always went to the outdoor theaters to see them when they came out. So yeah, April 68, I was at the Starlight Outdoor Theater with the old Plymouth backed into the slot, had the back of the thing open, and we were all lying there watching this space saga. And, you know, this was 68, and of course the Apollo program was going on, and, you know, I was all involved in that and was making my own scrapbook, and, you know, was also signed up for the Man in Space booklets and the stickers and the Apollo moon model and all this. And yeah, I mean, I specifically remember just being totally floored by the visuals. And I remember actually, you know, talking to my dad like maybe a year or two later and asking, well, what's going on with the space program? Because I saw people walking on walls, and where's the big cartwheel in space? And he's like, you know, that was a movie, right? And I'm like, no, they were walking on the walls, Dad. You can't do that unless you're in space. Yeah, you know, as a kid, I thought they filmed everything in space.
Sure.
But and he actually had the book, you know, the big thick book about how they made it. And gave it to me, and I read it. And I mean, a lot of it was over my head, but I was, you know, still like, wow, so that's how they did that.
Right. Do you still have
my
it?
original impressions were, I don't have that, but I have the record and another, you know, because I was totally blown away by this thing. So I remember that Easter, I asked my parents for the album. I didn't want candy. I didn't want any of that stuff. I wanted the 2001 soundtrack for Easter, and I got it. And I remember going to school and like showing people, and my music teacher actually put it on, and she was talking about Strauss and all this. And I'm like, no, this is space music. You know, I was there. I saw it. This is space music. But, yeah, I mean,
now,
I can't. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you mentioned creating a scrapbook when you were 6 or shortly thereafter, and subscribing to the Man in the Moon newsletters.
Right.
So
Man in Space, yeah.
Man in Space, sorry. The did I say Man in the Moon? We're not talking about Georges Méliès.
Something like that.
Well,
which is wonderful on its own, yeah.
Oh, no question. I was going to ask you if you had, as a kid, like tried your hand at making any replicas of 2001, and like, were you a model maker at a certain age?
I was a kit builder.
Right.
So yeah, I bought, you know, I actually had a really sweet deal with a hobby store, and basically I just would go in there and grab whatever model I wanted, built it up, and then they'd display it. So like, look, this kid's like 8 years old and he's doing this. So I had all sorts of models, and most of them were World War II aircraft and crazy hot rods, like the Barris stuff and, you know, Ed Roth and all the rest of that. The crazier the show car was, the more I loved it. So yeah, I did a lot of kit building. My dad was an amazing model maker. He used airbrushes and all this, and taught me how to use his old Binks brass airbrush when I was like 6 or 7, you know.
Oh, wow. How cool.
So I jumped into it pretty early.
Wow. Was there a point when you made the switch from, you know, doing hot rods and such to wanting to do something more space oriented with your models?
Well, because I had so many kits, I discovered pretty much on my own how to kit bash.
Right.
So I was making all sorts of crazy stuff, you know, and long before I understood that what greeblies were, and I just kind of did it organically. I was like, well, this looks cool. And if I stick this on that, you know, it kind of looks like it would work. So yeah, being a young kid, not knowing much about engineering, you can do all sorts of stuff.
Sure. Kludging it together, as they say.
Mm-hmm. sure. Yeah.
That's really cool. So I have to ask, when did you first think about getting involved with prop making and or recreating such authentic replicas professionally?
Professionally, I mean, I was doing my own stuff back in the mid to late '70s, just because I wanted to. I was born in Milwaukee. My parents moved to Sheboygan, which was this rural community. You know, kind of really was depressing for me because I had all my friends here and everything. Thankfully, once I got into high school, my art teacher was like right out of college, this blonde, almost surfer dude, Mr. Doolittle, and I was making. I think my first full costume was actually Gene Simmons from Kiss, and
of course, it's the late '70s after all.
Right? Yeah, and it's just like, oh, this guy's cool. I'm going to do that. And my parents knew all these woodworkers and leather workers, so like Pam helped me like make the boots out of leather and everything. They looked awesome. The whole costume looked awesome. But it was this little skinny kid dressed up like Gene Simmons, you know?
Sure. Whatever happened to those?
And then Star Wars, I have no idea.
Okay.
And
so go on. Star Wars, yeah.
And then I did Darth Vader, and this is before they had any like Don Post stuff. So I was making my helmet out of, you know, Bondo, and I learned how to use plastic fillers and all this crazy stuff. And my art teacher was like, oh, this kid's crazy. This is awesome. So he basically let me make all this stuff in the art room. And then I'd wear it, and, you know, all the jocks and all the rest of the guys were like, who's this crazy guy dressed up in like this black Nazi outfit? Yes, space Nazi.
Was your dad able to help you when you were working on any of that stuff? Because you mentioned him.
Not really. He was there mostly as he had a lot on his plate. So I was, you know, I kept myself busy and I kept myself safe, and I, you know, stayed out of jail, and, you know, basically made all this stuff because I wanted to do it. Though I didn't know about science fiction conventions or anything like that. And I spent a summer in Milwaukee, and I brought all the stuff with me, and I was doing costume contests and winning and breathing fire on stage and having the fire marshals come out and yell at me, but it was too late because I already won. And, you know, it was crazy. And I was like, oh my God, these are my people. And so I basically just moved to Milwaukee when I was 16. And my parents pretty much let me. There's a family here that pretty much adopted me pretty much. I got myself into school and got a job, and I'm like, I'm just going to stay here. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I did the alien critter from the first movie, which was pretty involved for a 16, 17-year-old, and caught the eye of some of the sci-fi people at UWM. And I think I met them when I was wearing my Vader costume, and they came up to me and they were taking pictures, and they were like, who is this guy? Where'd you get this? And then I was like, they're like, you're just a kid. But they were cool. They didn't talk down to me. They embraced it. They, you know, let me into their college little group, and it was just, I couldn't believe it. You know, it was such a change from being in Plymouth, where if you're not in Future Farmers of America or a jock, you're nobody.
Right. So how did that?
It just snowballed from there. Professionally, I didn't really start doing stuff professionally until like 2005.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, yeah, it was a long time.
So somewhere in that timeline, you must have decided to recreate your own authentic EVA spacesuit and helmet. So my question is, were you commissioned, or was it originally like a passion project that took on a life of its own?
Well, okay, so I've met a lot of people, and one of them, once I got into Acme Design, which is where I'm still working, we do rapid prototyping. We do a lot of trade shows. So I was working with a lot of materials that I hadn't in the past, and learned how to mold and cast and, use bridge ports and machining and all this kind of stuff. We actually had a prop group because we're all nerds, right?
Of course.
And so the first Saturday of every month we got together and we would talk about projects, and that's how I got hooked up with the guys who are now running the Novos. They were in our prop group, and we started doing the Battlestar Galactica stuff from the reboot. So I did all the helmets and all that kind of stuff, and the other guys were mostly working on the suits. And I'd made a 3-foot version of George Pal's War Machine. It was lighted and everything.
Wow.
I did some of my passion projects were some of the more peripheral George Barris hot rods. So I did some 1/18th scale models of those. I did the 2 cars from The Great Race, the Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis movie, which again was like this amazing movie that I loved as a kid, and nobody ever made any model kits for the cars. And I'm like, well, the heck with this. I'm going to do it myself.
Right.
So I was at Wonderfest in 2006, and my friend Tony Hardy, who's a huge collector, and he works for IMAX, so he knows all these industry people. Sure. And he brought Greg Nicotero.
Oh, wow.
The producer of The Walking Dead.
He's a legend.
He does all the effects for the, Tarantino movies and everything.
Yeah, no, he's got a very impressive resume.
Yeah, exactly. So he brings this guy over to my table, and he's like scoping it out, and he's like, wow, that's really amazing. Oh, you did this, and we saw the helmets and everything, which were all fiberglass. And he's like, you do really, really good work. I got this side project. And I was like, okay. He's like, have you ever seen a movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey? And I was like, this is the trick question, right? Have I ever seen 2001? And he's like, no, seriously, I'm building the pod, 1-to-1 scale, the space pod from 2001 in my shop. And he showed me some pictures, and I was just like dumbstruck.
Sure.
Like, oh, who's this guy?
Right.
I'm like, this guy's building a pod. And he's like, I want to have somebody do the spacesuit from 2001. Would you be interested? And I was like, geez, I'd love to. I kind of got a full plate. I'd love to do it. I'd love to talk to you about it. I guess, yeah. And he's like, well, I'll tell you what. I have the helmet. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I've got one of the helmets, and I'll send it to you. And I was like, well, that was a deal closer right there. Jeez. I'm like, hell yeah.
Right.
I mean, who in the industry does this? Oh, I've got a 2001 helmet. I'm going to send it to you so that you can, use that. And
yeah.
So that
after coming to your table,
Right. Yeah. Just, like in 20 minutes, I'm setting up this deal that's going to basically run my life for the next 15 years.
I was going to say, life-changing moment.
Oh my God. Yeah. And it was just like, it was this, and, as we talked, I mean, the people that I met and the experiences that I had because of this project, I never would have guessed. I would have been like, oh, I'm going to do one for me, maybe one for Tony and one for, Nicotero, and that's going to be the end of it. That's not exactly what happened.
Right.
But yeah.
Right.
I mean, he's really the guy who started it all. Tony's the guy who introduced me. He changed my life. And, Tony was always one of these guys who's like, whatever I made, he bought. So he kind of like kept me going on the side doing these projects.
Sure.
But 2001 suit was a game changer.
So, that brings me to another question. Obviously, what you're describing, how you got involved, that took place, but I wouldn't say before the days of Google, but not like it is now with the deep diving and all that. So once those pieces were in place, did your research on finding out details on the original specs for the spacesuit and helmet, where did that take you? How were you able to begin the groundwork, so to speak?
Right. Well, each piece kind of evolved over time. I did the helmet. I did the front pack and the backpack. The helmet, obviously, I mean, I had the provenance of the helmet is actually Greg Jean, the guy who did most of the effects and model work for 2010. When he was recreating the suit, he got the archived helmet pull from MGM, and that's what I had. That's what Nicotero gave me. So I had this thing. I mean, this is one of the holy grail pieces, you know, and I mean, I could have probably tried to do it out of my own head using photos and whatever. But like when I talked to Adam Savage, he's like, every time I try to do something from photos, it either turns out 10% larger or 10% smaller because you're never really sure, you know, you're trying to triangulate and, you know, you got the parallax from the lenses to deal with, and it's such a wonky shape too. You look at it and it's just like it's definitely 60s, you know.
It is, yeah.
And then like when I got it in my hand, I was almost kind of stunned. I'm like, well, that's what it looks like. You know, seeing it in 3D, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
So I mean, I did that, and I had some reference, but as time went on, I mean, like the helmet was pretty much the real thing. The front and backpack were pretty much all me. And then all of a sudden, you know, in I think it was Profiles in History in 2011, they actually came up with a front pack.
Okay.
You know, they found one of the Discovery front packs.
Oh, wow.
And of course, then I've been talking to all these people and people that Tony knew, like Gene Kazicki and McFarlane, and all these guys used to work for Industrial Light and Magic.
Right.
You know, they're usually on hand to go to Profiles and authenticate stuff. So they all go over there with their digital protractors and their cameras, and they're doing this huge photo survey of the front pack. And because they're kind of my clients and I'm helping them do stuff, they send me like 100 photos of the front pack, and I had to make it all over again. But I had digital protractors on the thing, color matched it, figured out what the buckles were. I mean, I was just banging my head against the wall trying to figure out what those buckles were. And they're from an ejection seat, from a, you know, vampire, de Havilland vampire, and the control sticks out of a de Havilland vampire, and all this aerospace stuff that, you know, it's like, if it wasn't for them, I could have gotten close.
Right.
But this was just, you know, and again, it's like all these people just came together and they were just so generous and just, hey, here it is. All you need.
Sure. I mean, that's cool because that's also proof positive that Kubrick's, you know, effects team was, you know, like you, kind of kludging things together in order to come up with the finished.
If you had access to this stuff,
right.
You know, I mean, they still do it to this day. I mean, you could go to like Army Surplus and find stuff. Not so much now, but
right.
You know, when I was growing up, my dad, and I would go into Army Surplus, and they had like cluster bombs that you could buy the insides of, and it's like, I don't think you can do that anymore.
No, I remember those days. We had a few shops like that around here when I was growing up, and I spent oodles of time. Oh yeah. That's where, you know, we went as teens to get our first camo jacket, you know, off the rack, and you knew it was worn by somebody in the service. The big holdout was really the suit. I couldn't really tell what the suit was made out of. Right.
I did the prototype, which is actually the one that's on display at the museum in New York.
Museum of the Moving Image.
Museum of the Moving Image, yeah. That one's actually clothing weight deer skin. Because to me, it looked like it was leather. It looked like it was quilted leather,
right.
You know. And so I was just going on my experience, and I don't really sew, so I had to hand this off. My significant other is actually a geek too, but she's stuck in the Middle Ages, and I'm Future Boy. She's in the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism.
Oh, cool!
So
I get it.
You know, it's a Middle Ages kind of thing,
right?
It's not like the Ren Fair; it's a closed group. So they had all of these costumers who were just magnificent, you know, and they did all this in-depth research, you know, talk about rivet counters. These people are just
Yeah.
obsessive. And this one girl, Melanie Schulster, she got a laurel for doing costuming. And so I basically brought this project to her. I'm like, you're so awesome. You're so great. We love your stuff. Would you do a big jumpsuit with lots of quilting on it for me? And I'll pay you for it.
Right.
So yeah, I got her involved. And my friend Cindy McCollin, she went and actually found the quilter. So a lot of people came to the table to kind of put this together. Oh, that's right. Melanie Schuster is now Melanie Bond. I should probably say that. So yeah, I gave this project to her, and I had screen caps and I had drawings, and she knocked it out of the park, man. And all that quilting, she did that by hand.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I try to give her props whenever I can. I even send her like, hey, your stuff's in the Kubrick exhibit.
Yeah. I bet she loves that. I would hope so.
Yeah. But then I got a quilter through Cindy. And so that helped a lot because there was no way. There's no way I was going to do all of that.
Right. How long did it take him to work on that?
I think she worked on it for like 2 years, on and off, because again, she's got a job and all the rest of it. This was a side thing for her, but she made the pattern too. So I could take that and then I could take it to somebody else who could size it or, alter it like what we did for Savage.
Gotcha. Hey, I get the rivet counters reference, by the way. I'm a lifelong Titanophile. They found the wreck the week I started high school, the first week of September in '85. I'll never forget. But I digress. The thing about the suit and helmet's evolution, I wouldn't want to forget to ask is along the way. Did you experiment with different scales and materials? Did you try and make smaller versions at any point along the way?
No. There's plenty of guys out there who were doing. Scott Alexander, he's the guy who did the Discovery that was hanging up at the museum. And he did like the pod and he did figures and stuff like that. And I just didn't have the time. I never really delved into any different scales on this project. I was so involved with trying to do it 1-to-1. I don't have a life anymore, really.
That makes 2 of us or 3 of us. No, I'm kidding.
Probably. No,
right? Stephen has a life.
In this stuff, and it's overwhelming. I'm like, this is a hobby. This is supposed to be a hobby. Now it's a job.
Let me ask a simpler question of sorts, which is just like, when did you feel you'd gotten close to achieving your life-sized replica?
Well, I think the first time it was just coming together where I'm like, I need to do the whole thing was in 2008 at Wonderfest in Kentucky. And I really pushed to have, that's when I had the front pack, the backpack, and the helmet on display. And Tony did a great job putting a whole 2001 thing and Planet of the Apes and all this stuff together. And they had Keir Dullea and Gary Lockwood there. So I'm like, oh, I have to make this happen, And it was great. I mean, I had, Keir Dullea, like, wore the helmet, and all the geeks are going nuts, and I'm just staring at him going, he's wearing my helmet.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was like this. It was so hilarious because, like, he's like, I'm going to put it on. And Gary's like, are you sure you want to do that? And so he sticks it on and he starts yelling for his wife. He's like, Maya, just take a picture. And then Lockwood goes, Maya, look, your husband's reliving his youth.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was great. And there was like this guy who was there and he was filming the whole thing. I didn't even know he was there. And he gave me a copy. And it's like, that's my antidepressant right there.
Yeah,
I start feeling bad. I put on those videos and I'm like, shit, this is pretty awesome,
So how were you first able to get the specific details on the exact materials used by Kubrick's team for the EVA suit and helmet? And and do you recall when your final version of the replica using those materials began to take shape?
As far as materials, a lot of it's pretty much self-explanatory. You look at it, like, okay, that's polished aluminum, and obviously the helmet's made out of fiberglass, and a lot of it I was just going off of what I know the industry uses because it can make molds and it can make parts that are pretty strong. So the only thing I was hung up on were a couple of the buckles and the actual material of the suit, which I didn't find out until I went to LACM in Los Angeles to see the exhibit, and then just did a huge photo survey of the suit, and I figured it out. But everything else was because, people in the industry and people and ex-guys from Industrial Light and Magic and whatever were just so helpful. I'd have a question and they're like, we'll get back to you on that, and like 2 weeks later, they're like, yeah, that's out of a vampire jet, or whatever. Because they know all these guys.
Sure.
The closest I ever got to seeing the real things was, going to the Kubrick exhibit and seeing what they had on display.
Well, and then you ended up getting your own thing in the exhibit, which is no small
Well, yeah, I never,
change.
Again, it's one of those things where it's like, pinch me. I mean, how did this happen? It's got a life of its own, really. I mean, it's out there. And again, it's like because of Tony and Adam and the rest of these guys hawking my stuff, because I wasn't out doing it. I mean, I'm all about shameless self-promotion, but I'm just not very good at it.
I
got
get
my
it.
little YouTube thing and my Facebook and my Flickr account, and I had so many people get a hold of me just because of that.
Sure.
I was like, okay, so here's a small little story about trying to make the stuff as accurate as possible. So the neck ring on the helmet, the milled aluminum, and I did a pretty good job again from photos. And then I had this guy who I met when I was out in Los Angeles, who's on the board of directors at the JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs out there. And he's a huge 2001 fan. And he went to the Kubrick exhibit, and he's like, yeah, I was looking at your ring, and I don't think you're really there yet. So he went and took the time to write out and figure out what he thought the measurements were, and he sent it to me, and he's like, well, when you do mine, could you do it this way? And I'm like, this guy sends stuff to Mars. Of course I'm going to do it your way. And then, like, when I saw the real thing, I'm like, yep, he was right.
Wow. Sure.
So, yeah, again, it's just like, because I'm working all the time and making, full-size elephants with zebra stripes and all sorts of crazy stuff for trade shows and whatever. I don't have time to, like, just pick up, and I wish I could, I'm not independently wealthy, and I don't have that ability. So I'm really happy when, folks come around and they're just so generous with their information and everything.
Yeah. Well, all artists need a patron, as they say. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and what's great about the internet is, before the internet, I was just some schmuck in Wisconsin making, cosplay level stuff, and because of the internet, it's just all to, it's another level. It's you want it to look like it walked off the screen.
Right.
And, well, a lot of, the Galactica stuff was really awesome. It looked just like it and all the rest of it. But, Battlestar Galactica is in 2001. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I got you. But I imagine, since you brought up the internet age, that it's responsible, at least in part, for helping get your EVA suit and helmet brought to the attention of Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman of the wildly popular TV show Mythbusters. Do you recall how that came about?
Oh, how could I forget? Yeah, he actually got a hold of me through email, and I have all this stuff still. And he's like, I saw your stuff. It's really awesome. Do you think you'd make a couple of them for me? And I'm like, yelled to try to stop me.
Who do I have to kill?
And what was nice, well, and the thing was, I didn't know at the time when I agreed to do it that he wanted the Clavius suits. Now, I already planned on doing the Clavius suits, but I wasn't even finished with my discovery yet. So I had to like switch gears and like, okay, so I'm doing this now.
Right.
But you know, dealing with him was so awesome, and my grandsons were just, you know, huge Mythbusters fans, of course, because they're kids and they like watching stuff blow up, and they like science, and then they're like, "You're doing stuff for Adam Savage," you know. I was a big thing in the third grade, but
so
yeah,
would
just the fact that he got a hold of me, and that, you know, he had the money to like push it to the next level, and you know, he was just so good at like, we laid down the timeline and what he wanted to use it for. And, you know, it's like, he actually got John Goodson, who's also ex-ILM, Industrial Light Magic, to do the backpack for his suits. And then I cut him a deal with, you know, paying for the two suits. And I'm like, get me that backpack, you know, because then I don't have to do it. And this guy's Industrial Light and Magic. He's one of the guys who helped restore the original TV Enterprise down at the Smithsonian. Guy knows what he's doing, you know.
Wow.
Like, why should I recreate this whole thing? You're going to make a couple of these things. You're going to have the pattern. You're going to have the mold. And so, yeah, he sent all that stuff to me. And so now I've got a guy from Industrial Light and Magic helping me make this spacesuit.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? You know?
So it sounds to me like your experience on Mythbusters was obviously great. Was Adam as passionate about 2001 and Kubrick in general as you?
Well, because he's in the industry, he's probably more into it than I am on a technical side. Because, I mean, he does this stuff for a living. But yeah, I mean, we were like kindred spirits. I went to his man cave when I dropped off the helmets, and we just sat there and went through books and notes and our research, and we're like going back and forth. And I lent him the front pack for him to make measurements off of and stuff. And it was just like, you know, we were like long lost brothers. It was just, he has that gift of whenever he's talking to you, he's just like, his eyes are locked on you, and it's just like, it's an amazing feeling. And just meeting somebody that you've watched on television for so long, and then there he is, you know, it's always kind of weird. But he was just so nice and just so enthusiastic about it. He had nothing but praise on what I did, and was just blown away by, you know, it's like, well, this isn't paint, this is gel coat. You're kidding, this is gel coat? You actually just polished gel coat, you know? It was just like, yeah, you couldn't ask. I always say, it's like, there's no money in making fake spacesuits, but if you get the right one, it gives you, well, access to people you never thought you would. You develop friendships you never thought you would. I mean, I got so much out of it that isn't monetary, like being in the Kubrick exhibit.
Sure.
You can't buy that. You know? It either happens or it doesn't. So
I get it. It's awesome. Did you and Adam have any conversations specific to Stanley Kubrick? When you were chilling in the man cave?
The usual. Yeah, just the usual. You know, the guy's a genius, the best looking helmet ever. You know, it's just stuff like that. You know, Fred Ordway and Harry Lang, their sense of style and making things look beautiful but still functional.
Right.
I mean, there's no way you could wear that spacesuit in space. I mean, it's like the gloves they're so thin. You look at a real space glove and it looks like a hockey mitt. You know?
It does.
But it's a movie. You know, it's supposed to be like a progressive futurism, and they went to those types of levels, but still, it was a work of art. You know.
Absolutely. So you've touched upon this already, but can you list some of the specific materials you use to faithfully recreate your finished version? And did you have difficulty accessing certain tools for, say, molding plastics, fiberglass, and metalworks?
As far as like tooling, I have all that at my disposal.
Of course you do.
The shop I work at, we do roto casting, we do fiberglass, we do metalwork, we do costuming. Are you a fan of Sven Gulli, the horror host here in Chicago?
I've heard the name.
Show?
I've heard the name. I can't say as I have seen the show.
Acme did his entire new set and his coffin and
Mike? Mike, are you there?
We lost him.
It's possible. You want to ring him back?
He still seems connected.
Mike, if you're there, we can't hear you anymore.
It's connected here.
Well, that was weird.
Oh, no, it's all good. We got you back.
All right, yeah. I don't know why. I mean, I've got my phone plugged in, and it's got a full charge. It's just the ether decided to mess with us. So where the heck was I? So, yeah, the shop.
You were mentioning the shop, yeah.
Yeah.
You have everything.
And, the maker space. So, yeah, I mean, if you have a maker space in your area and you like doing this kind of stuff, you can meet so many kindred spirits there. They're all geeks, they're all nerds, they're just on different levels.
Right.
And you get access to things and machinery that otherwise you wouldn't have the space or the money to use. So I'm big on giving makerspace props.
Sure. So when did you first introduce your finished recreation to the public? Was it via the internet?
Jeepers. It's probably 2014 when I had my Discovery suit finished, and that was at Wonderfest. I don't do as many conventions as I'd like to, because again, I mean, I'm spending most of my time working for a living and making spacesuits for other people. Mm-hmm. But that was probably it. And and then of course the internet, just putting stuff out there, you just meet all sorts of people who are of like mind.
Yeah. I did see
a video.
With
Adam having, a real astronaut wear the thing on his space, on his incognito walk.
That's next level.
That was a mind blower too. Yeah.
Sure. Definitely next level.
Oh my
stuff.
God. Yeah, I remember him sending me an email, and he's like, "This is the year you're going to have to watch." And I'm like, "What's he going to do?" Because I had no idea who the other person was. I just knew his measurements were different than Adam, and I had to find somebody to actually make fit his suit to those measurements. And one of the ladies at Makerspace helped me because she could size things. So that was her job, was to make his suit. Mm-hmm. And then, and then all of a sudden he's like, and, the guy I'm bringing along is a real astronaut. And I'm like, what? And it's not just any astronaut. It's Chris Hadfield.
Right.
Who, was the guy who was commander of the International Space Station and did the Bowie cover. So he was already a hero of mine.
Sure.
So I was just like, oh, you gotta be kidding.
Next level.
Yeah, that was pretty epic.
You must have been mind blown.
Yeah, I was on a high for like a week. I just couldn't believe it.
That's so cool.
Amazing. Again, it's like, who would think, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the old axiom is true. It's like, I think Woody Allen said 90% of life is just showing up.
Yeah, no, and that's right. And it's not just showing up, but it's talking and networking with people.
Yeah, it's like it's like the Jerzy Kaczynski novel and the great Peter Sellers film, Being There. Like, you have to be there in life, and if you do, once you are, it's amazing how doors can open themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So speaking of
people
which,
who don't get out. Sure, go ahead.
No, it's cool. You were going to say.
Just yeah, there's a lot of people who do cosplay and stuff who don't really, hawk their stuff as well as they should. Model makers are the same way. We're all just kind of introverts in a way. So it's hard for us to get out and kind of like, this is what I am and this is what I do because, like I said, I'm a child of the 60s and being a geek was not a fun thing.
Right.
It's not like it is now where it's like we run the world. I mean, it was, you didn't really want people to know. I mean, I did illustration and stuff. I worked for TSR, Dungeons and Dragons. So, I mean, I was in a different level.
Oh, that's cool as hell.
I could do fine art. I could do illustration. I could do sculpting. And then on the side, I dressed up like Gene Simmons. But, but yeah, it's just like, there's my professional persona. And then there's the stuff I do on the weekends at sci-fi conventions in Illinois,
Sure.
And those two were pretty separate for a long way, But
well,
it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, but you made it happen, and as a result of being there and having those doors open for you to walk through.
Right.
At some point, the Deutsche Film Museum in Germany and the Stanley Kubrick Archives traveling exhibition must have became aware of what you'd made. Tell us about that experience.
I have to give most of that to Adam Savage, because he's the guy, and I'm still not really sure whether or not they approached him to use one of the suits that we did, the Clavius suits, or if they were just interested in having the Discovery suit. And he's like, well, I know this guy. And he's the guy who made the introductions for me. So with him basically saying, well, if you want a 2001 suit, this is the guy.
Wow.
So they were totally open to it. They were more like, oh, we really want this thing. Can we make this happen? So there wasn't really a process where they had to examine the faithfulness of, what I was doing. They're like, well, if Adam Savage says it's good, then it must be good. And then I sent them pictures and they're like, yep, that's what we want. So That's how that all happened.
That's pretty cool. I mean, to have them knocking at your door as opposed to, saying, hey, I've got this thing and it's actually worthy.
Yep. The only other time I've had that happen is before this, I made custom TVs for the designer market based on an old 50s TV called the Predicta. And like in the first couple of months, this was when the internet was just starting. It's like we did the prototype, we did some photos, we stuck it on the internet, and like in a month we were in Time magazine. It was like wham, bam, bam, because it was a cool thing. Everybody wanted to have it in their magazine, and I don't know what a full page in Wired goes for, but when they come to you and say, we want this, and we will do it for free, you say yes.
Yeah, exactly. And how soon do you need it?
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing.
That right to you.
Right. Wow. It must have been an amazing experience, and it was really cool to watch you see your work on display at Museum of the Moving Image, which is where you and I met. And I can only imagine the feelings that must have been going through you.
Well, when it was on display in Germany, they did a really great job but it was isolated. It was like over in the corner, and it was a great photo op. Everybody took photos of it, which is great because I couldn't get to Germany, so I just grabbed everybody else's photos, And so yeah, I was always looking forward to having it come to the United States so I could actually go there, and then to come around the corner and seeing it displayed with the real screen use stuff. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
No,
I'm like,
it does
holy
not.
smoke. It's there with the real thing. In fact, when Doug Trumbull was there, we bumped into him, and, I brought him over to the display so I could get a picture with him. He's like, yeah, I saw this when I came in. I was wondering how they got a whole 2001 Discovery suit. Because the helmet's over there.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I made all that. And he's like, oh my God, I thought it was the real thing. And again, it's like, that's the best thing you want to hear. Is even the experts were like, wow,
Yeah.
Where'd that come from?
Praise
You know?
indeed. Praise indeed. Well, I mean, that's almost too cool to lead into this next rather nerdy question or or a technical one. But nerds can be technicians, and technicians can be nerds.
Well, you have to. Yeah, you have to. You got to be part designer, part mechanic. I mean, from where I started before I got into Acme Design to where I am now, just because of the level of the people that are there at the shop and being able to use the tooling. And I mean, I was like when I started at TSR, from where I was as an illustrator to where I was when I left. It's just magnitudes.
I think it's so cool that you were working on,
you know.
Yeah. I'm sorry to step on that. I just had to include, since you mentioned being involved with TSR and Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
I was one of those teens. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing now that you were involved in that stuff that I was, playing with is the wrong word, but
sure.
we took it more seriously than that at the time. That's exceptionally cool. And that influenced a whole generation. Suffice it to say, I don't think you'd have had the worldwide phenomenon of Game of Thrones, for instance, were it not for, what D&D brought.
Oh, Gary Gygax in his garage making this game?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what
I'm
it,
talking
and again,
about.
it was a couple of guys with a crazy idea who liked Lord of the Rings and dragons and medieval stuff, and they made a huge impact on the world because of it. And yeah, a lot of the staff artists like, Brom and Easley and, all these guys, they're still my friends. We still hang around. We still talk. I mean, Jeff Easley, who is Mr. Dungeons and Dragons, he does all the dragons and all the, he would go to Wonderfest and just hang around and buy model kits and talk to people, It's just,
That's awesome, man. Well, this is the technical question.
mm-hmm.
Ballpark, what percentage of your EVA spacesuit and helmet is true to the original materials used for 2001? And did you have to improvise any other bits you haven't mentioned, say, out of necessity?
What percentage? Well, I mean, the one that's on display is pretty much the same materials and everything. It's real metal work. It's fiberglass. The suit itself, because of necessity, and I didn't really know what the original was, I made it out of leather. I have since I did the photo survey when I was in LA. I found out that it was basically clothing, or it was a knit-backed vinyl, and it's very, very thin, almost like, if you remember, like the cheap vinyl, like
the baseball gloves, pleather.
No. It's not pleather. It's like what you would use when you went on picnics and stuff. It was like this tabletop.
Oh, of course,
tablecloth that were like this really thin vinyl with like a knit backing for strength, but really lightweight. That's what it's made out of. At least the silver one is. And then of course it's got a lot of batting and everything for the quilting. But I could tell just by zooming in on the parts of the suit that started to decay, probably because it had been painted so many times. That suit, I found evidence of yellow, blue, and red underneath the silver.
Oh, how
so it's been
interesting.
painted at least 4 times.
Wow.
And I'm sure they're probably using like, lacquers to paint them. So it started to attack the material and it's starting to slough off and degrade.
Well, the one you have on exhibit with the deerskin, suit, it's, for our listeners, it just does not get any better. If you want to see something as incredible and authentic looking as you see on the screen when you watch 2001, we can only implore you to, stop what you're doing and get to the exhibition, wherever it may be, when you hear this.
I mean, there's so much there, and every year they find more, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. And like I said, Nicotero built a full-size space pod, which we had on display last year or the year before in Washington, D.C. at Escape Velocity, the convention there. And, I mean, it's a full-size space pod.
Yeah.
And I had my silver Clavius suit next to it. But just to see this thing in 1-to-1 scale is amazing. And I'm trying to get the Kubrick people to next time, the next exhibit, to get that into the queue.
Yeah, it should be in there,
because even people who have been to the 2001 exhibit, they're going to want to see that.
Of course,
when it comes to like recreating things, that's about as good as you can get.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I don't say this lightly or often, but I was in awe when I stood there looking at what you'd made, man.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do.
It's just, one of those things, people, you have to see it to believe it.
Right.
So I'm wondering,
Adam said to me once, he's like, prop collecting is mostly an exercise in disappointment.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, even when you see like the old Star Trek props, you're like, really? That's what it looked like?
Yeah, right.
It's like that looks like it came out of a kid's toy chest,
Yeah, right.
But nowadays everything has got to be so hyper, realistic, and the paint jobs is just so amazing because everything's high def now.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that.
But yeah, I appreciate you saying that.
It's the truth, man. It's second to none, and as a lifelong Kubrick and 2001 fan, that it was just like,
right.
It's next closest thing to touching the original monolith, say.
Right. I tell people, I'm like, I got half the Kubrick exhibit in my studio. It's like I got the 2 suits, I've got a turntable from Clockwork Orange, and
nice.
The old transcriptor, because I loved it. I saw Clockwork Orange, and I'm like, oh, that turntable, because I'm an audiophile, I'm a Beatles nut, so it's like, I gotta have that turntable. So I went to Bang & Olufsen's, and I'm like, do you know what this is? And they're like, oh yeah, we can probably get one of those. And I'm like, good, because when you do, let me know. And I bought it. And
wow.
It's a glass case, just like the one that's in Clockwork Orange. I had it signed by Malcolm McDowell, and it's just.
Oh, no shit. That's so cool.
I got 2 spacesuits. It's just.
It's just
weird being in that space, Yeah,
you don't have to travel far to get to your own Stanley Kubrick exhibition.
Nope, not at all.
Well, since you mentioned, making the Clavius suit as well as, of course, the EVA, have you ever made or thought about making more than the one on display, to the same exacting specs?
Well, for myself, I'm pretty much happy with having the red Discovery and then a silver Clavius. I might end up making a green helmet because nobody's asked for one yet, and that's pretty iconic too.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, you can only have so much space for screen use stuff, and it just starts taking over your house.
Yeah. Well, if you need space for an extra green helmet or 2,
oh sure,
you got a couple guys on the line. You got a couple guys on the line who will definitely take them off your hands and promote them liberally.
Nice place to put them.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I'm sure I can find space in my tiny apartment and put them on blast on social media.
Like, the helmet's just such a standalone piece.
It is. It is.
It's like all you really need is that helmet, man. And
I agree.
Like Adam says, he's like, it's the best space helmet ever. And I think he's right.
I agree. As a follow-up, we can only imagine the price that you could get for these things from, say, wealthy collectors, and given your with your attention to such detailed handcrafting, it's clear that no assembly line type of production could simply churn these out. But have you considered making more of them, perhaps even for other museums, if you were commissioned?
Well, right now I have at least 10 commissions that I'm working on, actually, for exactly that thing.
Oh, wow. How did
So
those come about?
which is why I have no life.
Don't say that.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been able to get the helmets to them. I got the front packs to them, and I'm pretty close. This year, I'm definitely going to get these suits out of my life.
Right.
The suits have been really difficult because, like I said, I don't sew, so I have to find people who understand that I want this to look like Kubrick's shop made it. This isn't a Halloween costume.
Right.
And, there's definitely a learning curve, but I found some really talented people and they've helped me out. And my life has just gotten more complicated.
Well, in a good way. Well, that, of course, life...
my parents are getting older and, the life has just gotten... When I started this in 2006 to now, my amount of free time has pretty much been cut in half.
Yeah.
So, if somebody like Doug Trumbull said, I'd really like one of these, or better yet, Tom Hanks, because we all know Tom Hanks is a huge 2001 fan. If Tom Hanks ever came up to me and said, I'd really like one of these, Tom Hanks would have a spacesuit.
Okay, well, you hang on to that thought, and I'm not going to divulge too much, but yes, there may be something there. So
awesome.
I
promise that I'm a big fan.
Yes, we will. Mike, it's a good job you found a wife before 2006.
Yeah,
because you've been very busy.
Well, and the thing is, like I tell my friends, I'm like, mixed marriages don't work. If you're a geek, if you're a maker, if you're a creative, you got to find somebody else who's in the same thing. They don't have to do the same thing. Like I said, she does illuminated manuscripts and things like that, and I do spacesuits. I mean, but we all understand what it takes to do it, and we all are like, focused on our hobbies to that extent, where she understands if I'm downstairs working on this stuff, just being in the house means something.
Well, sure. I mean, that's your veritable yin yang right there.
Right. Exactly.
And I mean, I've been fortunate to date a few women who were artists, but in other fields. Mm-hmm. And I forget who brought it to my attention, but the idea that, in such cases, two artists of different disciplines can always find common ground by discussing the process.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because it's all the same. There's research, there's knowledge, there's the learning curve. But as far as like doing these things, like as a production, Winston Dunlop over at Executive Replicas, who did the 1/6 scale Discovery and Clavius suits, he and I have been talking, and we actually like signed a contract between the two of us. Mm-hmm. He might be making the helmets. He does have the license for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't heard a lot from him lately. He was also talking about doing the suits, and I mean, just truthfully, the amount of people who have the means to have a fake spacesuit to this caliber, I think I have them all already.
Mm-hmm.
I got the JPL guy, and I've got the ILM guys, and I got, the museums and stuff like that. So, I mean, there may be some out there, but I can't imagine what it would take to get it to the point where it would be cost effective.
Right.
What would I sell my helmets for? I have them on display, and, just for a joke, I'm like, what do you think that'll cost? And they're like, twice as much as what I sell them for.
Wow.
But the thing is, when I do something, because I'm a fan, I don't do this. This isn't my living.
Right.
This is my, a little side hustle, and, because I want it. I look at it and I'm like, well, what would I pay for it? What could I afford? If, if I had my gold card cleared, and I really wanted this, how much would I pay? And it seems to be a lot less than other people because I don't have that kind of money, you know?
Right. Well, I get it. And, you know, you said, you know, you do this, you know, this is your side hustle and obviously a passion project.
There's really no money in it. What it's done is it has paid for some really good vacations, and I get to meet some of my heroes like Greg and Nicotero and, you know, Kier knows me by sight, and you know, hanging out with Gary Lockwood and hearing about his old Hollywood gunslinger. Yeah, his stories are just, oh my God, they're just wonderful. You know, I mean, again, it's like you can't buy this; you just have to relish it when it happens. And you know, like I was talking to some of the ILM guys, and I'm like, the Ares model that came up for auction, they went down there and photo surveyed it and got Trumbull on Skype and were authenticating it. And Greg was there, and Greg, you know, going through the photos, and Greg who did the Close Encounters ship and Star Trek and all, he's a model maker. I'm a model maker, you know, so he's like my hero.
Right.
And they're showing people these pictures of the suits I was doing, and Greg was like, wait a minute, go back. There's that front pack on that Clavius suit. Did somebody find one of those? And they're like, no, that's Mike. That's the guy he met last year. And he's like, really? Because Greg has almost an entire Clavius suit. He has everything but the front pack. And then he hired me to make his front pack. So now I'm making a replica for his screen-used suit. And then when I went out there to deliver it to him, out of the back of his car, he pulls out the backpack from 2001 Clavius suit and lets me photo survey, take measurements of it, and color matched it for me. I mean, really?
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, holy mackerel.
Yeah.
What a sweetheart, you know? He didn't have to do that. He did it because, you know, he knew I would get a super kick out of it. You know,
well,
he bringing
a
$50,000 movie prop into, you know, his favorite restaurant and just lets us just drool over it. It's just holy mackerel, you know?
Sure. But you get to do it. And I mean, to bring it back to how you were describing doing this out of love, and also the way that life has granted us, you know, less time as we get older and our obligations grow. You know, and to bring it back to the Beatles, it's like, you know, I thought when you said that, I thought of John Lennon's lyric of "Life is what happens to you while you're busy
making other plans." Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, well, speaking of other plans, which, you know, you may or may not have ever considered, and this is, you know, sort of a joke question, but sort of not. Like, you know, have you made or do you plan on making any other faithful recreations from 2001? I ask because, I mean, surely there's a boardwalk or a fancy pier out there that could sell tickets to a life-size Discovery One centrifuge. You know, either by the Thames or say, you know,
I don't have.
How about the Jersey Shore?
Pockets that deep, you know. Like I would love to be part of something like that, but I mean,
you could just see all these tourists.
Goes, I'd love to get my buddy who did the moon bus. I'm trying to work out a deal so that I can get him to either make one or let me make one of those. And then the other one is Space Station 5.
Of course.
I've always loved that thing, the big cartwheel in space, you know?
Yep.
I look at that thing and I'm like, all I have to do is a quarter of it. And the rest of it is just replicated, you know? So it's in my head. I know how I would do it. I have the means. I have the tooling to do it. It's just getting around to it. And right now, I'm just buried making fake spacesuits, man.
Yeah. You know what?
I have no life.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I mean, I make the time for these things, you know, when I'm not at my job, keeping a roof over my head.
Right.
And I love it. I love it. And I want to email you. I have a couple photos I took when I met Keir. I gave him, I've been a Lego enthusiast my whole life, and
nice.
out of my own bits and pieces, I created a very miniature Space Station 5, and it had just been on my shelf. And I had made little videos with the Blue Danube playing behind it, and I would text it to friends, as a joke, mostly to bemuse ourselves. And it had just been there on my shelf for the longest time. And when I knew I was going to meet Keir, almost as an afterthought, as I was leaving my apartment, I was like, grab that and give it to him. Bring that. And I've got a couple photos of him, looking it over and kind of regarding it, in appreciation. And, that's one of those things where you're just like, I'm so happy I made that thing, not to keep it for me. Right. Although when I made it, that was my only intention, was just like, this is how I've always staved off boredom, by never being bored. I just get involved with creative stuff I love to do. And, and then when the moment, presented itself, I was just like, no, that's going to belong to him from now on.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about, like making a red helmet and a yellow helmet and giving it to the two of them. But they're so labor intensive. Yeah. And it's like, well, then that's a vanity project for me, and I would love to do it, but I got all these guys who are just chomping at the bit to get their stuff, and I just, in my head, I just can't. I can't do it. I gotta put my free time into getting this stuff done so I can have a life again.
Sure.
And I don't know. Have you seen Steve Neal's Space Station 5 model? It was on display in California. I think Adam Savage talked him into making one.
I might have seen a video.
Steve Neal.
How do you? His last name is Neal or Neil?
Neil. I can send you his address and info as well.
Please.
But he built a beautiful. He runs a company called SNG Studio in Ventura, California.
Okay.
And it was on display. I think it's like a 4-footer, 3.5, something like that. So it's outside. It's not exactly like the original, which was like 6 feet or something like that. It was ridiculously huge.
Right.
But he did a great job under a very tight deadline and made it happen. And he also did the Star Child model that I think Adam has. He would also be a great guy to talk to, because he's such an enthusiast and he's such an amazing model maker.
Oh, please contact him for us, and
totally, I will totally do that.
Send myself and Steven an email as a follow-up.
His wife and Gary Lockwood are pretty tight too. So every once in a while we get to hang out with Lockwood when we come to town with Steve.
Very cool.
So that's always fun.
Sure.
But it's just I wish I lived in California. I always say I'm just some schmuck in Wisconsin who makes fake space.
No, don't say that, dude. What you've done is amazing. You go to California,
it's like everything you've ever wanted to see or do. It's like, it's all there.
Well, you know what? I mean, you make a good point, but I have had this conversation with a very dear friend, Scott Bross, and we were talking about being, artists in a world that's run by non-artists. And he made a very good point to me years ago that stayed with me. And he said, look at it this way. If everybody in the world, was creatively inclined and possessed some talent that made them stand out, what would make us unique?
Yeah.
So, it was like my experience when I went to Emerson College in Boston, and prior to that, I was a kid who was just doing my own thing and obsessed with creative projects. And I remember, joking with my parents after I moved up to Boston, it was like suddenly every kid surrounding me is gifted and talented. I've got to up my game or something,
Right. Yeah.
But it was good. It was like, someone throws a hat down in a ring for you in life like that.
Yep.
You step up. You step up.
Yeah, you got to take it. I mean, otherwise you're a wuss,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I had a friend of mine, father figure who just passed away. And I remember being up at his cottage with one of my best friends from high school. And he was looking at some of the crazy stuff I was doing, and he's like, you know what? I'll pay for you I'll pay for a one-way ticket to Hollywood for you, because I think that's where you need to be. And I looked at him and I was like, you're crazy, man. Because I'm like, I don't know anybody in Hollywood. What am I going to do? The couch tour? Be on the street in like a week. But in some weird way. Like when we went to K&B and Nicotero was like, well, you know how to do this kind of stuff, and I'm like, are you offering me a job? And I couldn't even do it if I wanted to, I'm not going to sleep on a floor, and I'm not going to be the low guy in the totem pole, but, and he's like, well, that's okay. You can just work on my side projects. I'm like, well, in a way, I made it to Hollywood because I'm doing this stuff for people in the industry.
Absolutely.
I'm not in the industry, but I'm working for guys who are in the industry doing their side projects.
100%,
man.
Yeah,
that's good
100%. 100%. That's,
it's like instead of going out there and risking everything, I kind of sat on my hands and it kind of wimped out. But, in the end, I ended up getting there and I'm safe. I got a good job and I'm doing all this cool stuff and I'm getting to see and meet people I never thought I would. And like, again, Greg Jean's like a hero of mine.
Sure.
And I was out there and my girlfriend just went through some cancer stuff and he gives her a freaking get well card with a little, like Close Encounters ship that he drew on it. I'm like, what a sweetheart,
Yeah.
It's like,
well, it's like you said, in a way, you did get to go to Hollywood and,
right.
And,
in a way.
And not even vicariously, I would say, not even vicariously. When I was younger, my mom used to say, honey, it's important to always be humble and be appreciative of those who informed the person that you're becoming. But sometimes it is okay to pat yourself on the back.
Sure. Yeah, because you're the one who did it.
Right.
You can get all the positive, like, Ken Stick saying, I'll buy you a ticket to Hollywood. Well, that's great, but then what do I do when I get there? That's the thing.
Right.
I always say you can be as talented as all get-go, but a lot of it is just, being out there, networking, and
being there.
Getting to know these people. Yeah, getting to know these people. And then they go, oh, my God, you're the guy? I went to one of Kazuki's geek parties, these ILM get-togethers that he has every once in a while, and it's all invite only. So I'm meeting all these industrial people and sitting next to Dorothy Fontana, DC Fontana and her husband, and watching this old Hammer film they worked on and doing the MST3000 thing and just pinching myself. I'm like, how the hell did I get here?
So listen, Mike, it's just been so cool, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, man. Hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, man, the pleasure is mine. Absolutely.
I'm sure I speak on Steven's behalf in saying this is going to make a great show. Steven, are you there?
Yes, absolutely. I'll speak on my own behalf.
Wonderful.
Yes, what a great conversation. Very enlightening. It's nice to hear some kind of a technical guest, a creative like yourself, Mark. Yes, that's been most enlightening. Thank you very much.
Oh, great. Thank you. I appreciate all the kind words and actually getting a hold of me and making this happen.
Well, that was a fascinating look into the world of a model maker and all-around talented and creative guy. Thanks to Mike Scott and our marvellous host, Mr. Jason Furlong.
Coming soon.
Next episode, we will be speaking with Nora Brady herself. That's right, actress Gay Hamilton from Barry Lyndon. I'm Stephen Rigg. Tatty bye.
It's Kubrick's universe. We just live in it.
We have taken very thorough precautions in this podcast against broadcasting anything which might only be attributed
to human error.
These guys aren't scientists. They're making it up as they go along.
Thank you for listening to the Stanley Kubrick Podcast. Come back soon.
It was real nice talking to you. Bye. Over and out.
This show comes to you from the Stanley Kubrick Appreciation Society.